General Nessel, thank you very much for being with us. The fake electors testified in front of the grand jury in this federal case that handed up this indictment, the Michigan electors. Do you expect more charges down the line from the Justice Department tied to their role in this federal case?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be surprised to see more charges coming, more indictments as it's spread out into the states. I mean, there were a lot of actors at play here. And of course, what you needed in order to ensure that this plan, however insane it might seem to many of us now, you had actors on the ground in all 7 states that were targeted who were trying to orchestrate this plan. But I should say this, I wish that we had a log of every single phone call that Donald Trump made as part of his pressure campaign. I think people forget that in Michigan, among the many other people that he contacted, he contacted county board of canvasser members who were certifying elections in places like Wayne County to try to get them to change their vote after the certification process. He went to the lowest levels of government to try to get anyone and everyone that he possibly could to change what was a legal process that has been done under really, unextraordinary measures over the course of many, many years. It went all across the country, this plot, this conspiracy, and clearly Donald Trump was the one who was motivating all of it to occur.
Attorney General Chris Jansing here. I want to play for you how Trump's lawyer, John Lauros, sees this alleged fake elector scheme, a little different than what you just had to say. Here he is with my colleague, Savannah Guthrie, on Wednesday.
There is something wrong with sending fake electors, trying to go beyond and around the law.
These weren't fake electors. These were alternate electors, which John Kennedy did in 1960. It was an exact protocol that was followed previously.
Different situation.
That different situation was the case where some southern states were coming up with their own fake electors because they thought JFK was going to integrate. But in general, how do you see that defense playing in front of a jury in 2024?
Well, let's just take the state of Michigan for a moment, right, and contrast that to what we saw in 1960 in Hawaii. First of all, in Michigan, there was no recount. Remember that Joe Biden won our state by over 154,000 votes. That's an insurmountable number. So there was no effort to do a recount whatsoever. Every single one of the claims that had been made in court had been shot down. There was no viable avenue for a decertification of an election that, again, had already been properly certified here. But, what I find to be almost comical that I'm hearing from those who are still supporting Donald Trump is the notion that, what if he didn't really know that he lost? I don't know. What about all of the homicide cases that I perpetually prosecute? That would be like a defendant saying, well, yeah, I shot the person and the bullets hit them, but I didn't know it was going to kill them. I didn't have that kind of familiarity with how a gun works or how bullets work. This man was the leader of the free world. I think for us to treat him as though, he's a toddler or something and has no ability to understand that everyone around him, exclusively Republicans, by the way, right? All of these individuals that he was trying to convince to assist him or who were telling him that he had, in fact, lost the election were all his most trusted advisors, campaign staff, attorney general, et cetera, et cetera. I can't believe that anybody would actually, lend any credence to this argument that he couldn't have possibly known somehow that what he was doing was wrong or that he had really lost the election. It's ridiculous on every level.
And General Nessel, I want to read this key portion of the indictment, the federal indictment on your state. In the meeting, the defendant, that's Donald Trump, of course, raised his false claim, among others, of an illegitimate vote dump in Detroit. In response, the Michigan Senate Majority Leader told the defendant he had lost Michigan not because of fraud, but because the defendant had underperformed with certain voter populations in the state. Yet he still pushed that false narrative over and over again in your state. This is similar to what he was claiming, by the way, in Philadelphia, and there does seem to be a racial connotation of singling out Detroit or Philadelphia in another swing state. What do you make of the charges against him right now?
Well, first of all, when Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey told him that, he was exactly right. In fact, as the former president was told, he actually did better in the city of Detroit in 2020 than he had done in 2016. He lost because he was so outperformed in predominantly white areas like Oakland County and Kent County. And so, again, he was told this after he, remember, summoned our Senate Majority Leader and our Speaker of the House to Washington, D.C., to an Oval Office meeting where they were browbeaten by the likes of Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, encouraging them to do something that was completely illegal, which was to, undermine the certification process in our state. And was told time and time again by those individuals and by many others here in Michigan that what he was asking could not happen because it was illegal to do so. Again, I think it's a very strong case for those people who are still supporting Donald Trump. I don't think it's because they don't think that what the allegations are really occurred. It's that they don't care that those things really happen because they support Donald Trump and think that he should still be president. And they don't care what means or mechanisms would have been utilized in order for that to happen.
So given the evidence you've seen, do you think you're the first domino to fall here? Could other states' attorneys general begin to file charges against the fake electors targeting their states? Have you had conversations with other states' attorneys general on this?
Well, I have, but I think it's really important to remember that, the law varies greatly from state to state in terms of what kinds of charges would be applicable. The jurisdiction varies greatly. For instance, in my state, I have statewide criminal jurisdiction, which means I can prosecute a case, investigate a case in any county in Michigan. That's not true for some AGs in other states. Some of them can only work in a certain county if they are authorized to do so by the county prosecutor or the district attorney in that area. So there are a lot of different factors at play. Also, the facts, remember, are different from state to state. Remember that, for some of these false slate certificates, some of them had conditional language, others didn't. So these are not really uniform across the states, and each state AG is going to have to make that decision for themselves as to whether or not they have the facts and the evidence that comport with the law in their particular case.